Book 1, Chapter 10. Summer 2014, Oxford, England. Zari. On the last day of her stay in Oxford, Zari got up early, careful not to wake Aggie sleeping in the narrow bed next to hers. Pulling a curtain back, she was confronted by the horrified stares of gargoyles perched outside on the rain gutter. A lone student sat in the sun on a stone ledge overlooking the grassy courtyard, texting. Beyond him, a few shadowy figures moved between the columns in a vaulted corridor. Slipping out quietly, she made her way to the street entrance of Fontbroke College, waved a greeting at the porter who stood guard at the gates, and wandered downtown. Through the plate glass windows of a bakery, she saw rows of diminutive square cakes, each bearing a line of script written in frosting. "Thank you for looking after the children. Thank you for feeding the fish. Thank you for looking after the rabbit." These must be made to order, Zari thought, because how many people were going to need a rabbit sitter? Maybe Oxford was awash in rabbits. She passed under a tiny enclosed bridge fitted with diamond-paned windows that connected two buildings. Consulting her mobile for directions again, she strode down a small alleyway and emerged in a square lined with identical sand-colored stone buildings. She searched for a doorway emblazoned with a placard that read, Dorrington Moore Institute, under 24 hours surveillance. There were faces carved in stone over the door, one a dour man in a flat cap, the other a jowly fellow who looked vaguely like Benjamin Franklin. She stared at the door, hesitating. Could this really be an art conservation laboratory? It looked more like a museum. Checking her calendar, she confirmed that this was the correct address. Moreover, she had an appointment here in 2 minutes. She stepped forward and rang the doorbell. When Zari was buzzed in and ushered by a receptionist to the main workspace, she was confronted by the collision of two worlds. Daylight filtered in from skylights on the vaulted ceiling. Opposite her, centuries-old oil paintings, looking forlorn and bedraggled without their frames, were suspended from clamps on giant metal easels. Sleek machines sat on rolling tables, and a bank of cream-colored cabinets lined a wall. The atmosphere was softened by the calming strains of a Baroque cello concerto emanating from hidden speakers. A man seated by a metal trolley laden with jars of liquids and gels got up and extended a hand. "Zari?" "John Drake." He was not much taller than her, maybe in his mid-40s, with a face like a lump of clay that a sculptor had taken an initial, fierce pass at, then abandoned. Broad cheekbones, a prominent nose, and deep-set eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. He wore sturdy black leather boots and had what looked like a miner's lamp on his head. As they shook hands, Zari caught a faint whiff of citrus. "Fashion-forward headgear, isn't it?" John pulled the contraption off his head, ruffling his short dark hair. "Tool of the trade. We do a lot of squinting in this business." "I'm sorry to interrupt your work." "Don't be. The break is welcome." He gestured to her to sit. Zari settled in a chair. Above them, rectangular lights were suspended from the ceiling by rubber-coated wires that led to a control panel on the wall. "Do those go up and down?" she asked. "Yes. This is all about proper lighting. It's tedious work, interspersed with the occasional blaze of discovery." "I'll keep my fingers crossed for that blaze to flare up while you're restoring the Vanderzee painting." John smiled slightly. He took off his glasses and polished the lenses with a square of white cloth. "A fellowship with the Institute for Northern European Portraiture. That's quite a coup for an American just out of the gate. The topic of my dissertation was female portrait artists in Europe from the Renaissance through the Golden Age. It was a natural progression for me to go deep on Cornelia Vanderzee. I'd already built the foundation with my doctorate." "Ah, that puts things in perspective. Oxford's your first stop, I gather." "Yes. The Renaissance Arts Conference brought me here. For the next year, St. Andrews will be my base. But my research will take me on the road quite a bit. I know there are a few Vanderzee portraits in the UK, but where are the rest?" he asked. "They're scattered in museums all over Europe, and a few are in private collections. I've gotten permission to see the one in Scotland this fall, and I'm waiting for approval to see the others." "Best of luck," he said, replacing his glasses. "How can I be of help? You said you had some specific questions for me?" The first notes of Vivaldi's Four Seasons began filtering through the room. "To be honest," Zari admitted, "what I'd really like is a crash course on how the restoration process works." "Come to my lecture in London next month at the National Gallery," he suggested. "It's about the conservation of paintings." "There's a Van der Zee at the National Gallery I have to see anyway. I'll time it with your talk." "Excellent. If you like, I can give you a quick primer now." John led her to a machine that looked like it had been borrowed from a hospital's ultrasound imaging clinic. "First, we do the non-invasive work. We'll use X-rays and other imaging to see under the layers of paint, and what we find there will guide the restoration. Depending on how many layers we find, we'll do a chemical analysis of a cross-section of the painting. That shows us, layer by layer, the origin and age of the pigments. If some of the layers prove to be newer, we'll remove them one at a time until we get to the original paint." He went to a row of tall metal frames and pulled one away from the wall. The Font-Broek College portrait had been removed from its wooden frame and was gripped by rubberized clamps in the center of the metal structure. "Oh, she's here!" Zari went to stand at John's side, looking a bit out of her element. "They look like they've lost a limb coming out of their frames," he agreed. He pressed a button on the wall and a light descended from the ceiling. "Here," he handed her a headlamp. The woman's hands, which had been half obscured by the frame, were now fully revealed. One held a pendant that dangled from a gold chain around her waist. It was in the shape of a circle overlaid by a cross. Where the two lines of the cross intersected lay a smaller circle. In her other hand, the woman held a book with a drab brown cover. "Is that a letter on the spine of the book?" Zari asked. John pulled on his headgear and switched on the lamp. "Looks like a B," he said. Zari hugged her arms to her chest. "Talk about instant gratification." John smiled, revealing a slight gap between his front teeth. "I'm glad somebody is getting a thrill out of this. Maybe you're in the wrong line of work. Do you think the black background could be hiding something?" Zari turned back to the painting. "Like that copy of the Mona Lisa in the Prado Museum in Madrid." There was a bit of a media flurry about it, I remember," he said. "They removed the black paint and found a landscape underneath." "Right. Suddenly the painting wasn't just a ho-hum copy. It was work created in Leonardo da Vinci's studio." "Maybe even done by the master himself, or so the theory went," John said. "That's a high bar to set, I'm afraid. There's little chance we'll uncover anything that glamorous." Zari's face reddened. Why had she even brought that up? "On the other hand," he added kindly, "I have learned to expect the unexpected." She threw him a grateful look. "Whatever you discover, can you share it with me, along with an explanation of the technical details?" "Of course. I'll start with this. The book she holds was likely red, not brown." "How can you tell?" "The artist probably used cinnabar, a mineral that makes a red pigment called vermilion, to paint it." He trained his headlamp on the woman's hands and the slim spine of the book. "When vermilion is exposed to air and light over time, it can change color quite drastically. It can even go black under certain conditions. We'll know if this is the case when the pigments are analyzed." "So even before you peel back layers, what you're seeing is not what the artist saw." "Exactly. Keep that in mind when you're traveling around to study these portraits." "What else can you do to figure out what's really under there?" He waved an arm at the machines across the room. "The X-rays and images called infrared reflectograms show us any underdrawings, and we can determine the age of the wood panel as well, using a technique called dendrochronology. There are loads of methods these days to uncover clues about old paintings. The days of gut plus experience are over for the most part. By that I mean when art experts identify paintings just by examining them. Ever since these technologies entered the field, it's been astounding how many paintings have been proven forgeries, fakes, or complete mysteries." "The benefactor is a private citizen, right?" Zari asked. "Why would anyone other than a descendant of the artist or the subject pay for this anyway?" John looked at Zari sideways, amused. You've been talking to Dodie Butterfield Swinton. He's always quick to pounce on a theory and promote it. A theory? So you don't know who the benefactor is either? When someone hires me on the condition of anonymity, I listen. That's why I still have a job. John pulled off his headlamp. I understand. It's just, what if it turns out this painting isn't Van der Zee's work? After pouring money into its restoration, wouldn't that be a blow? That's the risk of looking beneath the layers of paint, Zari. Whatever is hiding in this portrait won't be a secret much longer.